Hi everyone, Armoured Pants here, and I have the next video for you in the British line, the Tier VIII TD AT15, following on from the AT7. Before we get into the video, just to let you know that we recently, just a few days ago, opened up the Discord channel for the YouTube channel, so please come and join us there. There's going to be a link in the description. Now, as with the previous tanks, this is a painfully slow tank. The whole TD line is very, very slow, tedious. Of course, we'll have a look at why that is in the tech spec, and we'll have a look at that using blitzhanger.com, as we always do. However, the one thing I would say about this tank is, on this line in general, there's amazing consistency between the line, right? So as you go up from tier 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, where we are now, the skills that you acquire in those earlier tiers will serve you well here, because the tank here plays very similar to the tank before it, which played similar to the tank before that, and so on. So there's great consistency between the tanks as you move up through the tiers, and therefore the skill transfer is almost complete. It's almost 100% skill transfer as you move up through the tiers. There are some differences, but we'll have a look at those as we go along. Now, the AT15, I would run improved fuel and T and pudding and T, same as the tanks before, right? So again, that consistency we're talking about. The other interesting thing about this is I would also use gun rammer, supercharged and refined gun, as we did before, because the gun system of this tank is even better than the gun system on the previous tank, which is quite amazing. And like the tank before, it actually has a 20-pounder gun as a top gun. And if you're not from Napoleonic times, as you said before, and you're wondering what the fuck that is, it's an 83.4mm gun. And I would upgrade the gun first on this, because there's much better actual DPM and penetration on this gun than there is with the guns before. They really lack pen. When you consider you're going to be up against heavily armoured tier 8s and tier 9 heavies, you really need that top gun first. Now, as with the tanks before, both supercharged and gun rammer are options. You get 226mm of pen with AP, 258mm with APCR, which goes up to 237 and 271 respectively if you run calibrated shells. You have 42mm of pen with HE going up to 46, and you're doing 190 to 250 damage points per round. Muzzle velocity is 1326 meters per second, which is the same as the previous gun, and it's quite good. It's quite decent for a tier 8 TD. It has to be said, it is a very respectable number. Rate of fire is great, 3.4 seconds if you run gun rammer, 3.7 seconds if you run calibrated shells, and that means basically you can take out a large number of tier 7 tanks in 12 to 15 seconds, which is really impressive. Now, here's a big improvement from the previous tank. The gun depression is 10 degrees, and you get 10 degrees in elevation, so a significant improvement in gun alignment. So that's 1+ for this tank. Does the same speed, 20 kilometers top speed, 10 in reverse, and with the previous tank, power to weight ratio and traverse are just bloody awful. But that's not what these tanks are about. Now, here's the kicker. The gun index on this tank is 22.5 or 22.5k. That is 10% better than a grill at tier 10. M index is non-existent, it's 1.1. Forget about that. You're not going anywhere in a hurry in this tank. But this gun index is spectacular. For tier 8 TD, this is amazing. I mean, it's 45% better than a Jagdpanther 2, for example. So this is just amazing. So utilize that. This is one of the key benefits of this tank. This gun system is excellent. Now, one of the downsides is that there's a significant decrease in concealment numbers compared to the tier 7. And if you range of 304 meters like an RU251, he's going to spot you at 240 meters. And when you fire, that goes out to 278 meters. So it's a big decrease in concealment numbers. So be aware of that. You're going to get spotted up more and from further off than you did with the previous tank. Now, going to the armor, because this tank is all about armor, as with the previous tanks, right? It has, you know, excellent armor on the front, trollish armor. It has this spaced armor on the sides, and of course you can side scrape in it if you look at those relative iron numbers. When you side scrape, it's amazing. Plus, another big improvement on the previous tank is the gun positioning. The gun position is in the middle of the tank, which means you can side scrape from both sides, as you could not do with the previous tank. You're vulnerable at the back, of course. You're vulnerable at the sides, but you still have some armor at the sides. You still have that spaced armor. You have a big gun mantle right in the center, which is going to absorb some hits for you too. So it's very difficult to pen front on. You can side scrape. You're going to get bounces in this tank a lot, right? It's really good tank in terms of getting bounces, as were all the tanks before. So again, similar type of gameplay. If we look here front on, you can see when you're top tier, you can be a top tier bully. Against your peers, you're okay, and even when you're up tiered, you're still going to get some bounces. All but the biggest guns are going to find it difficult to pen you front on. In terms of tactics, well, exactly as we played the previous tanks, right? The major drawback of this, it's maneuverability and its mobility. You can't get around the map, so therefore you're going to play in a limited pocket of the map, right? You're going to have limited map engagement, as we described it before. So what does this mean? Well, it means that you need to carefully select where you're going in this tank at the start. If you make the wrong decision, go down the wrong channel, you can end up with the whole game passing you by without firing a shot. Exactly as we discussed with the previous tanks. So all the lessons that we learned there before, we want to apply to here as well. The big difference here is that you've got some advantages. You've got that better gun rotation arc, you've got that better gun positioning, you've got that better gun system, but poorer concealment numbers. But you have to make allowances for that, particularly as you're going to be playing against better players up in Tier 8. Now let's have a look at some gameplay on Hellas. This is a mastery game, and we will have a look at this to the accompaniment of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music. And this is indeed a little night music for a little efficient battle in this tank. Now you can see at the start I decide in this thing there's no point going towards C, that you're going to get isolated, you're going to get surrounded, light tanks are going to get behind you. So really what you want to do is do exactly what this tank was designed for. So this tank is called the AT, right? The whole range is, and that is assault tank, right? And basically they were designed for punching through solid built-in permanent defenses, right? And that's what you should do with this tank. Play it for what the designers made it for. Now this is a typical engagement in this tank, right? You get a bounce and you're able to pen with this really good gun system. See how accurate it is right into the lower plate of the Tiger II. Of course I have to use APCR, but you know, that's what it is for. Fire off another one here. And the good thing about this tank is, as we discussed before, because you can fire so often, so quickly, you can afford to take snapshots, because like this one here, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't go through because you're reloaded in just a couple of seconds. And this means that you have better game engagement, right? You can engage and make positive actions in this game when you have a tank that fires more than you can with a tank that fires less. Now, it's not about the DPM, because when you fire a shot, if you have a long wait time, it means you can't take speculative shots. You can't fire off, snapshots and not care whether it goes through or not. And you also can't do things like, for example, use a round just to track an enemy. And that of course is a big disadvantage. But in this tank, you can have huge game engagement, because you can fire so frequently and so often and to such great effect. You just reload and then you're just ready again. And you can see here, right, I'm consistently putting in damage on these guys, right? Like, they're not getting a minute's piece. It also makes it more difficult for them to get into a position where they can side scrape to move from one position to another, because they have no time to do that. Normally you do such things when your enemy is reloading, but with this thing you don't really have that chance, because there is hardly any gap in between the reload. Every time you pop out, you're getting smashed. Every time you show some vulnerable part of your tank, you're getting smashed, like the Tiger II. And he thinks he's coming out in a side scraping position, but with the APCR in this tank, with the accuracy as you saw there on the Jag Panther, you can just deliver time and time again. So basically, with this tank, as with the previous tanks, you just use it as this assault tank. You use it to push through those heavily defended parts of the map, usually down the heavy channel, usually where you have to do minimum amount of movement. And then you can do things like this. You just push onto the enemy. They can't pen you. You're just pummeling. And when you drop adrenaline, wow, when you drop adrenaline in this thing, it's literally like doing some sort of illegal Class A drug. You are just on a high. This thing just pumps out rounds like there's no tomorrow. If this thing was on the streets, it would be illegal. You probably get 10 years for selling it, because it just pumps out rounds. It is just a slow moving wall of inevitable death coming towards you, and you know, you just give so much damage. But the other thing is, you don't give the enemy a chance to rest. They can't get into a position because every time they move, every time they're trying to get a shot, you're just putting round after round after round into them. And that is a great thing about this tank. Now, this game here is a perfect example of playing to the strengths of this tank, pushing through the heavy channel, you know, going through the heavily defended area with their heavy tanks, capturing the bases, seizing strategic parts of the map, and just putting in significant damage. So 2 bases captured, that flank cleared, enemy scattered, and we're 2v2 now. But I've kept nearly all my hit points. You know, this poor Tiger 2, I just been pummeling him the whole game. You know, and now I have my hit points preserved, so I can just take him out. And honestly, you know, he doesn't stand a chance. You know, he got one shot into me, he's trying to reload, he's trying to maneuver, now he's trying to get a shot. No chance. You know, and this is the brawling strength of this tank. We discussed it before with the earlier tanks in this line. All you need to do to be successful in brawling is keep the enemy in front of you. Then it doesn't matter. If you can keep them from getting behind you, and we discussed, I think, in the when we looked at the AT2, you know, you're like the leopard against the water buffalo, where you're the water buffalo. You need to stop the leopard getting in behind you or on top of you, right? Because, you know, otherwise you're going to be dead. But if you can keep him away from you, in other words, in the tanking environment, keep the enemy tanks in front of you, back up, keep them in front of you, you are going to enjoy brawling all day long in this tank and having games like this. Steel wall badge delivered, mastery badge delivered, almost 3.2k of damage, you know, huge amount of block damage, and that's basically what this tank is good at. Its disadvantages, of course, as we discussed before, are its mobility. If you allow tanks to get in behind you, or if you pick the wrong channel, so for example in that game, if I went towards C, you're putting yourself in a position where it's easier for the enemy fast movers to get around behind you and to basically take you out of the game before your game begins. If you have really good players on your team, you with meds and lights, and you go down their channel after them, they could clear off all the reds before you even get a chance to engage. So in that respect, the tank has disadvantages, but play to its strengths, make the right decisions to start, and this tank can deliver. So let's have a recap on the key points. So it's a slow moving wall of death that we saw, like a Roman legion coming towards you. Stab, stab, kill, kill, stab, stab, kill, kill. Exactly like the tanks before, and this is exactly the analogy we used before. Like the tanks before, it's a binary tank, as we just discussed. It can be hit or miss. You can have a great game like that if you choose the right channel, but if you don't, then it can pass you by. The improved aiming arc on this is significant. It's much better gun placement than the previous tank, right in the middle, whereas the other tank had it on the side. Rate of fire is trollish, as we said, 12 to 15 seconds. You can take out almost all tier 7 tanks with this thing. Great gun system, accurate good pen, and as we said, it's 10% better gun handling index than a grill, which is just phenomenal in a tier A. But its mobility is non-existent, right? So you've got limited map engagement, exactly as the tanks before, but by now you should be good at choosing the right channel and utilizing this tank effectively. So therefore, choose your opening carefully, use the setup analysis, because that's key to choosing right, going down the right channel and making the right decisions. Choose wrong, choose the wrong way, and the game can pass you by and you can end up doing 0 damage and either being taken out or just sitting there doing nothing. But just notem bene, the gun handling, it's just awesome. Worth repeating again, guys. You know, it's just superb. But the reduction in the concealment numbers is significant, so be aware of that. It's a big decrease from the tier 7, so just be aware of that, guys. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. Cheers mush, and I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.